So friends, in an appearance in Arizona, Donald Trump threatened Liz Cheney. So what are the implications for Donald Trump in Arizona? And what are the implications for him in his criminal cases in Georgia, in New York, and in Washington, D.C.? Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, you've probably already seen the reporting. In an appearance out in Arizona, Donald Trump threatened former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. And we're going to talk in a minute about the implications for Trump in Arizona and in his pending criminal cases. But let's start with the new reporting out in Arizona. Headline: Arizona Attorney General's office probing Trump's violent comments about Liz Cheney. Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays said Friday that her office is investigating whether former President Donald Trump's violent remarks about former GOP Representative Liz Cheney broke the law. Quote, "I have already asked my criminal division chief to start looking at the statement, analyzing it for whether it qualifies as a death threat under Arizona's laws," Mays, a Democrat, said during a taping of Sunday Square Off on 12 News in Phoenix. So we may know soon enough whether the Arizona law enforcement authorities believe Donald Trump's language and conduct violates Arizona state law. I suspect it does. And friends, here's what Vice President Kamala Harris had to say about Donald Trump's threats. Headline: Harris assails Trump for saying Liz Cheney should have rifles shooting at her. And that article begins, Kamala Harris said Friday it was disqualifying for Donald Trump to say former Representative Liz Cheney, one of the former president's most prominent Republican critics, should have rifles shooting at her, to see how she feels about sending troops to fight. Now, friends, before we turn to the implications for Donald Trump in his pending criminal cases, let's look at the exact language, the exact statement that Donald Trump made about Liz Cheney. Quote, "Let's put her," he was talking about Liz Cheney, "let's put her with the rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her. Okay? Let's see how safe she feels about it. You know, when the guns are trained on her face." Close quote. So friends, I believe the first word in that threatening statement is perhaps the most important. Donald Trump says, let's, L-E-T apostrophe S. We all remember from grade school grammar, that is a contraction of 2 words. Let us. So what did Donald Trump tell his supporters? Let us put Liz Cheney with the rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her when the guns are trained on her face. That's a threat. We all know it's a threat. Donald Trump knows it's a threat. Here's the thing, friends. When prosecutors look at a statement to see whether it constitutes threatening language or conduct, which would be a violation of a criminal statute in Arizona, they don't just look at the words in a vacuum. They look at who the person is that is speaking the words. They look at what that person knows or reasonably should know he is communicating. What are the implications of what he is putting out there in the public square to his supporters? What is some of what we know about Donald Trump's past violence-inducing statements, all of which is relevant in assessing what he was communicating about Liz Cheney? Well, we know that Donald Trump used inflammatory rhetoric, violence-inducing rhetoric previously against Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And how did his supporters respond? Well, they entered into a conspiracy to kidnap and kill the governor. Indeed, they were indicted and criminally prosecuted for it. That was a natural and probable consequence of Donald Trump's reckless, violence-inducing rhetoric. That's relevant to assessing this statement, this threat against Liz Cheney. What else did Donald Trump do? Well, he said things falsely about Haitian Americans and immigrants in Springfield, Ohio. They're stealing pets, they're eating cats, they're eating dogs, all that ridiculousness, all of that false, inflammatory rhetoric. And what happened? Haitian Americans and immigrants were threatened, were assaulted, and were subjected to endless bomb threats. That's relevant in assessing this statement, these threats against Liz Cheney. What else did Donald Trump do? He lied about FEMA workers who were bringing much needed relief to hurricane victims down in North Carolina. He lied about what was going on and what those FEMA workers were doing. And what happened? Some of Donald Trump's little play militias down there took up arms and went out, quote, hunting FEMA workers. That's relevant to what Donald Trump knows or should have known about his, violence-inducing rhetoric, statement, conducts. What else did Donald Trump do? Donald Trump said on January 6, 2021, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what he needed to do to keep me in power. And his supporters predictably reacted by hunting Mike Pence and chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." That's relevant to the statements, the threats that Donald Trump made against Liz Cheney. So friends, let's turn to the implications of this latest threat against Liz Cheney, the implications for Donald Trump in his many pending criminal cases. These statements can and should be used in two ways in connection with Donald Trump's current criminal cases. Donald Trump is on pretrial release in two criminal cases, one in Georgia, right? He is a RICO co-defendant together with lots of criminal associates, criminal co-defendants for the crimes he committed in violation of Georgia state law to try to steal the 2020 election. He's on pretrial release in that case. And one of the conditions of his release is that he not commit any crimes while on release. No federal, no state, no local crimes. Donald Trump is also on pretrial release in his federal criminal prosecution in Washington, D.C., for trying to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. And one of the conditions of release in that case is that he commit no crimes while on release, no federal, state, or local crimes. Donald Trump is on pre-sentence release in his New York criminal case, in which he's already been convicted by a jury of his peers of 34 felony crimes, falsifying business records to cover up hush money payments, to cheat and try to steal the 2016 presidential election. And again, he is to commit no crimes while on release in his New York State prosecution. And he appears to have committed a crime in violation of Arizona state law. We'll know soon enough whether the law enforcement authorities in Arizona believe that his threatening statements about Liz Cheney violate Arizona state law. That would mean he's violated the conditions of release in both his Georgia case and in his federal case in D.C., and he's on pretrial release in both of those cases, and he will have violated his conditions of release pending sentencing in his New York case. Therefore, I don't pretend this is going to happen before the election. It should, but it won't. But it should happen, I would say, the moment Kamala Harris is declared the victor in the upcoming election. There should be motions filed by the prosecutors in all of those cases, seeking to have Donald Trump revoked on release and detained pending trial or pending sentencing, because the evidence will warrant it and because that's the way the law was intended to be applied to somebody in Donald Trump's circumstances. That's one way these threats should be used in connection with Donald Trump's pending criminal cases. But there's another way. Set aside for the moment that when you're on release in these felony cases, one of the conditions of release is that you may not commit any crimes while on release, or you're subject to being revoked and detained pending trial or pending sentencing. The law also provides that when you're a defendant in a felony case, if there's clear and convincing evidence that your conduct, your statements pose a danger to the community, or even one person in the community, you should be detained pending trial. That's separate and apart from whether you committed a violation of state law or federal law or local law. So both of those vehicles can be used to revoke somebody on release and detain them pending trial or pending sentencing. And that is precisely what should happen in this case, in these cases, given Donald Trump's threats to Liz Cheney. Let us put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her. When guns are trained on her face. Friends, I was in court in Washington, D.C. some time ago when the issue that was being argued by the parties, that is the prosecutor, Jack Smith's team, and Donald Trump and his defense attorneys, what was being argued was whether it was necessary to put a gag order in place to try to prevent Donald Trump from endangering witnesses and jurors and interfering with the due administration of justice by spewing these violence-inducing lies into the public square. And Donald Trump's lawyer said, well, Judge, it was actually a 3-judge panel, Judge, Donald Trump isn't responsible for what his supporters do when he makes statements. And the judge said, no, you're wrong. We all know the pattern. Donald Trump makes statements about witnesses or jurors or prosecutors or judges or family members thereof, and threats ensue from his supporters. Donald Trump knows this. He knows this, and he uses it to maximum effect. He intends his supporters to do precisely what he just said in that statement concerning Liz Cheney. That's why this is a threat. That's why it's a violation of state law. And that's why he is a proven danger to the community and, frankly, everybody in the community. And he should be revoked on release and detained pending trial. And the minute he loses the election, that is precisely what the courts should do and bring this long national nightmare to an end. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.